And we're live again. Um, Sorry for the fact there's been a little bit of delay in these broadcasts. The life taps up and things have to happen, and I'm attempting to try and get this whole thing. That's another thing. I'm attempting to get rid of the word try. I mean, we use it quite a bit in the society. I mean, look at this tier system discount, Thursday. Reality, as an older person, we have to look for ways to make our buck go further. We all do. As we get older, we find we have less and less of those bucks to chase around, so that we have to chase them further than we ever had to. Unfortunately, we treat people that as they get older as just multiple commodities that we're just waiting for them just to go away and die. I might digress, and that's something maybe a topic that we might discuss later, because all of us are going to become seniors one day, and let's face it, we're going to have to face that reality. Excuse me. Of course, now, every time somebody coughs now, they think, oh my god, somebody's got COVID. Well, you know what? People used to cough before COVID, people cough after COVID. Coughing is part of life. You got summer, you got winter time, dry air. Matter of fact, I'm going to turn my humidifier back on a little bit. So if you see a little smoke in the background, it's not fire, it's just the humidifier making the air nice and wet for me, so I don't have to cough as much as I did before. And I can have a brief conversation without having to put cough marks in my mouth, as I was kind of a pain in the ass. Anyway, enough said about that. Okay, what this channel is about, really what happened. My aspiration of this was actually ironic. A friend of mine, we used to talk about a lot of things when we were going to hockey, watching hockey, whatever. And not always about hockey. So, it meant that we really did have a lot of other things that we were interested in. We just didn't have a bit of us just there. He was the one who suggested the idea of having some sort of YouTube presence where we could talk about this stuff, and hopefully maybe get some conversations going about that between other people, so it's not just us talking about it and nobody doing anything about it. Just hence why I originally called it a daily rant or weekly rant, because it felt like ranting. That's all we were doing. And I said to myself, the only problem with ranting is, like I said, getting the fact for ranting is just easily dismissed by society. Everyone tends to want to rant about something and do nothing about it. And when you do that, you really just put yourself in a position where you're really not. You have no agency. You're just complaining. People can dismiss your complaining, and especially the people that are doing something, whether it be very small, because them at least doing something is better than you just talking about and complaining why anyone's not doing something and not doing anything all about it than just complain. So I hope to be a little bit more a light of the tunnel here, and maybe even be part of the process as well myself in my own life and the way I look at doing things in my own personal life. One of the things I do a lot of, which was probably more related to last week's topic, the one I'm just posting up in the channel now, hopefully everyone gets to finally see it now after side extra further, is the idea that we used to be as a society more conscious about using preserved things better because things cost money, they were expensive. We didn't have this mass production culture where a lot of things were produced very mass produced. We didn't manufacture goods, but not to the extent they have now, not to the extent disposability we had now. Things were fixed more often because they were so expensive. Because we had to pay people decent working wages and material costs and that, and once you figured those in, the goods were very expensive. So having things like a TV set used to be a big luxury item. Getting your first TV set cost hundreds of dollars back then. Well, hundreds of dollars now doesn't really mean anything, because you can buy TVs up to cost several $1,000s, but in today's money, that several $1,000s equaled like several hundreds of $1,000s back when I was growing up in terms of relative money. And these were things obviously that at one point in time would have been in the purview of people that were really, really well off, as opposed to the average Joe who can now buy things because of commoditization of society, moving industrial manufacturing to places like China and places in the world where less things and things made. Obviously, has led to us having a lot more stuff, and the decadence of that. And of course, now the repercussions of that is the incentive to fix things and reuse things is not as much. Even though we do have some places like Value Village in Canada and America and some other countries, local organizations do similar types of work for charity, and the impetus is trying to recycle the society and trying to find a way of creating some value with things that normally people don't place value, that we end up in a landfill anyway at the end of life, useful life. So we are not totally screwed yet, but a lot of the people out there protesting this only and not really coming in the door with any solutions are not walking the walk, as I say. I mean, you want to complain about something, don't complain about something unless you're going to come to the table with some sort of actual concrete solutions, and you're going to participate in the process and do your own little part to help. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to just go over here. I got this list here that I started a while back. I'm just going to give you a couple ideas and topics I may discuss. I may pick one of these today to go over more detail. A lot of the things I'm talking about around about the geopolitical situation in terms of like freedom of speech, freedom of discussion, freedom of expression, the increasing eroding of our civil liberties and their compliance with that, sometimes for the reasons that we think that are going to be for our personal safety or out of fear or fear of others. And once we get to a phase where we start fearing each other to the point that we're afraid to even be with each other, which is where we're heading now, which is really, really, really a scary time for social beings like human beings to put themselves in a situation where being with other people is now an undesirable thing because you're afraid so much of your own survival. Yet there's so many other ways you could possibly die anyway, even if you don't figure out that type of thing. That it's just, I mean, sometimes being afraid is okay. It keeps us on our pose, but when we get to the point where we're so afraid that we participate in society and want away from it and don't want to have anything to do with anybody for fear of our own impending doom and facilitating it, but sooner it becomes a real problem. Of course, the one topic I have on the topic, just sum off here, just a thing that I put down as summarized notes. Wrong speak is political, racist, sexist, etc. What was the time we used to be able to say things even if they offended people? Offenses to be given as well as taken. We have a democratic society. The way democratic society is people have the ability to offend people, but we all have filters and we have sensitivities in terms of what people can we offend and whether or not we're going too far with the offense. Or so we all put our own brakes. We all censor our sensitivities based on the context of who we're talking about. If a crippled or handicapped person was talking about with some comedians that were crippled doing crippled jokes or handicapped jokes, and what that person is saying to you is that they are all in the joke themselves. They know that they are making fun of themselves. And they're giving you the permission to be part of the process, that they're not offended by you laughing at it. Matter of fact, they're relishing the fact that they understand and just particularly appreciate the irony of the fact that they're actually ridiculing themselves, just like the old Newfie jokes being told by Newfoundland. The majority of Newfoundland jokes come from Newfoundland, something most people probably don't. Most ethnic jokes usually come from the people that they're making fun of, which is kind of like it just shows that these people do have a sense of humor and can take themselves a little less seriously than maybe other people do. Racism has become a topic. We're talking about the fact that, I believe, Morgan Freeman had it right. Mike Wallace asked Morgan Freeman, when are we going to stop having to deal with racism? And when Morgan Freeman, blankly said, as a black man, and he did not want to be recognized as a black man, by the way. Matter of fact, that was the big problem, is that racism is all about the fact that we tend to categorize things and categorize people into categories based on quantity of things that we can see, like color and such as that, gender, and etc., etc. And when he basically said, when is basically going to stop? He said, when people stop talking about it. When we stop making it an issue. When we look at people for who they are as people and what their value to society, to us, as opposed to what other qualifiers that may differentiate them from us, or the people, or the whatever. And we can't talk about these things, is that the fact is we don't need to make them the center of our focus, and we don't have to use them as a way to discriminate against people other than capability for certain things, like obviously certain jobs or certain capabilities that people, whether it matters the gender or physically or mentally or whatever, there's always going to be limitations on what each person has capable they can do. Nobody can do everything. It's an impossibility. Just some people are less capable and others in certain areas and more capable, and we have to recognize what areas each one of us within our capabilities, and we do things within our limit to provide the most value to society. And that goes for anything. That has nothing to do with anything that has to do with gender or race or anything political affiliation. All these things, as people, we come to it with a certain set of things. We come with a certain set of ideologies. All of us build over time through our affiliations with friends and family, and that political and values about other people are also kind of formed by other people's within our circle. So maybe in some cases there may be a little bit of unlearning in certain behavioral patterns and certain biases that we all have built into us, and at certain degrees that we don't always recognize. But most of us, if we just think from a very intelligent point of view and look at it just from the point of view of just look at it, how would you feel in most situations if you were treated the way you treat somebody, would you feel good if you treat someone the way you wouldn't treat yourself? And understand the context. The thing is that if you're in a venue or making comedy and jokes, obviously there's an expectation there is going to be some mode of differences. That's what comedy is. It's the foibles of life. If it's in real life and you're just pointing something and you see something that's obviously meant to be comedic, but in the context of just pointing at somebody because you're attempting to ridicule or cause them harm, mental, emotional harm, and you're just ridiculing them for the sake of just one up in them making some sort of virtuous thing about yourself being better than them, clear that there's no place in society for that outright. And we sometimes all do it, but we doesn't mean because we do it, it's the right thing to do. It's like there's an old saying I remember when I grew up: there's a place for everything, and everything in its place, and including things that may be political, or some people might consider racist, or some people sexist, or whatever, homophobic, or whatever it happens to be. Sometimes the ironic things, the people that make the most fun of these types of differences are usually people within the groups themselves, as a way of letting them know that it's okay to talk about them, that they're not diseased or anything wrong with them. They're human beings, and they just have a different way of looking at things based on certain values and ideas that they have, that they hope other people appreciate and respect them for. And the thing is, like I said, the fact that now we got in a place that we've gotten to the point where we're policing the one very concept that is very, very democratically the idea of speech and expression, whether it be in political terms or whether it be just in emotional terms or just societal terms. And this is a topic I think we need to discuss more. Hopefully I'll get some discussion going about that once I'm ready to discuss it in more detail. The idea that independent thought, or what the idea of George Orwell's groupthink theory, that society is expected to think like everyone else, that nobody's allowed to have dissenting opinions, especially opinions that are unpopular or go against whatever the narrative of the society is, or whatever the message that the people in power want to press. The fact is, having authority figures in life is important. We do have to have some sort of direction in society to direct things, but it has to be done within the context of being thoughtful, logical. You never condescending. You never use condescending language to explain to something, or act in a condescending manner to someone that you believe does not understand your point of view. You should produce sufficient evidence so therefore no people do not have to second guess what it is. And the fact is, in a healthy society, debate should be allowed. What's the best course action at all? Everybody should be allowed to at least exist, and then we can debate it and find out what's the most prudent action based on what we know. And with everything goes in life, facts always change based on the context of the information. So you have to be open to letting ideas flow instead of just having one narrative and saying this is the way it is. Tough it. I'm telling you exactly what it is. I'm the authority. You have to listen to me or else. Well, this is why we're in the place right now with all the dissent happening in the world, because people have this thing that we should allow dissent, not to the point of when people have to resort to violence as the only way to get their message heard. Messages told by violence never get heard properly. All they do is bring out more violence. And wars, and this is how wars start, and wars are a process that nobody ever wins in. And maybe we should learn that lesson. Look how many societies have fallen over the centuries because of the concept that one society wanted to be right at all costs at the expense of other societies capitulating and being wrong at all costs. So this goes right into groupthink, and the fact that society, we have to involve these nuances and allow debate and discussion and all these types of things. The fact that we should replace facts with feelings. Feelings should not be the way we look at everything. There should be some facts. And feelings should be tempered, of course, because obviously people get back to the topic about racism and sexism and jokes and that. It's all about, there's certain about, we are feeling individualism. There should be some sort of conceptual way of looking at to determine, make some sort of common sense of those. If something you're expressing may be hurting the feelings of someone that doesn't understand what it is that you're doing to them, like a person that reduced capacity mentally may not understand jokes about making fun of them, which is sort of like shooting fish in a barrel. So as opposed to someone that does understand, who can actually defend themselves and fight back against the ideas that you're trying to purport or the labels you're trying to place them. So that's one thing I do think is something we need to be more aware on. The fact that just because we can make jokes and stuff about a free society doesn't mean to always have the right to do so, because there is some people out there we need to protect, because the fact is they're not able to defend themselves from ideas that they might either agree with or be even aware about that they're being mocked or ridiculed for. Um, as I said, the election got passed, the Coke versus Pepsi election. The fact that in political parties all around the world, these most countries have got what's called dipolar system of elections at the table. You have one group on the right and one group on the left, and there's no room for nuances. And as one of the great Americans, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, or one of the Americans said during the time of the American Enlightenment, when they first started democracies, that the proliferation of the party system would be the ruination of the democracy. And what it really comes down to is that, I don't know if it was him specifically, but it was almost one of the great leaders of that time that quoted this and saying, and you can see in the fact that the polarization caused by the parties, in effective expediency. The political party obviously makes debates a lot quicker. It makes finding consensus a lot quicker, because you don't have to do an issue basis, which is what originally the democracy was supposed to be about. Freeing people to be able to have their free speech to represent a certain constituent group of people that obviously can't be at the same time, with a general consensus of what the position generally those people are, and then you come together a group and try to find things that make the best sense for all around, with making least compromises for every group, because every group's going to have to make compromises to get things forward. But having a party system to try and streamline that thing, and obviously then enforcing a certain group of policies in a sort of macro sense on this group of people that may be representing people that don't necessarily always follow all the tenets of principles you have, but enforcing them to have to follow certain tenets within this party group becomes a very, very polarizing thing, and hence why parties tend to shift left and right all the time, trying to reach the bellwether of how the consistency of the people that they are representing want them to represent. They're always guessing, even though they're supposed to know what these people represent, want, by putting them into this sort of party box of that, it sometimes forces people within that group of people to represent values that may not be constituent on the people, some of the people's representatives in that group, who generally, for the most part, see themselves as part of the larger group in terms of overall policy, but doesn't allow the dissent of ideas. It doesn't allow them the free flowing of ideas. Then when there is times when some people may not agree totally with everything, it forces people to have to agree with that for the sake of party union. Obviously, with votes, obviously, if a vote on a certain issue, you want the idea of having a party is to guarantee that your votes will always go your way, and having the party where everyone has this sort of group thing where all the leader tells the party how to think, in spite of maybe some people thinking differently, and the occasional lots of free votes, and the fact that I think free votes should be a very important issue. I think there should be more free votes, and not all free votes should be ones that are constitutionally requiring the government to step down, but maybe to reform and try to rearrange the policy so that more people can feel like they're under the tent on both sides, or in some cases four on one side, in case of Canadian politics with the parties we have now today, and the sort of split in the ideology between the left and right and all the nuances thereof. The other idea I was saying has come out is the cultural and ideological revolution. The fact that I consider the fact that we go through these renaissances of culture and ideological changes. Each generation goes away, one generation fades in, a new generation comes in, and the transition period, how that becomes, how the disruption of the transition, and whether or not anything is gained or lost in that transition in terms of this next generation come along. Do they learn anything from the previous generation? Do they discard everything from the previous generation? Do they keep some of it? Do they what the world that we're leaving behind will be like for the next generation and the generations to come? And that's sort of always a revolution going all the time. Then of course, obviously, the idea that the fact that the polarization, Coke versus Pepsi election thing, the idea that it seems to me that the parties are becoming so close together, they're more on the kind of what Trudeau himself kind of wanted, which was the idea of the one-party state, where the great dictator, or in this case leader, has the power to do whatever he wants because he has all the power and he doesn't have to worry about ever having it challenged, because society itself doesn't challenge it, because in the case of a Chinese dictatorship, you don't ever have to worry about leaving power directly from the representative people. You have to worry more so all the members in your party, and the infighting between the power struggle always exists within a political party. In this case, when there's only one party, and then everyone's trying to pull the party the one direction or the other, taking power and trying to get favor amongst get the control system, and how that system can kind of easily break down, and it doesn't allow for a lot of true dissent of the people, because it never truly represents the people. Hence, the people have no representation by even vote for it. thereby stripping the democracy. The one key point that democracy is good for is to give people some representation, the fact that they can make some sort of difference. Whether it's an effective difference or not, the system has. It's always a voting person's ongoing process, and I hope that democracies do evolve over time and become more and more effective, and that we still, thereby also keeping some of the social elements that we have picked up, obviously, because the level of compassion for the people that are less fortunate in society, the disabled, and our elderly. The mean people that do deserve a little bit more respect than they do get in society, and many of them wouldn't have to work. There'd be many more jobs for the younger people come along instead of having older people fight for those same jobs just to have some sort of level of dignity. Um, then, of course, the one big topic that I noticing a lot lately, and this is something that a lot of people in society are really, really onto, the fact that messaging. You know, we see a lot more messaging, and now we follow people that are famous, and people that are famous tend to feel like because they've got a certain level of fame, they all have personal pet peeves or sort of issues or principles that are part of their own existence in life, and they feel that now they've got this big soapbox to represent it on because people are looking at me when they didn't look at me before as an individual. I didn't have power, just like I don't really have a lot of power here, but hopefully over time as I become more involved and more known in that, there's going to be people that are going to go against me, there's going to be people that are going to go for me, and that's the risk you take when you become famous for anything, whether it be this or anything else, is that the potential is you're going to have certain people that you'll be able to influence because they're going to follow you based on the fact that they believe, they have a certain kind of belief in you. That's my watch going off, sorry about that interruption. Belief in some of your ideas and follow them because because they believe in them wholly on their own, or as I always tell people, don't believe anything that's saying on a word. Always do your research about anything. There's lots, we were in a generation of things that we have lots of information out there. Always check out everything. Don't trust anything totally. Do your own research. Be smart. Don't be a lemming. And as long as you don't be a lemming, and if you agree with me because you're really true to your principle, you find that the information it has is compelling and it makes sense, and you've done your own work and your research, and you're not just following your blog like most people unfortunately do. As the one it goes with celebrity culture, people are lazy, so they have to find someone that's authority they like and they admire and that. And celebrities are definitely a portal for that. And the big problem is right now, you can see like now, especially with the issue of China and all the censorship and all the things, the marketing of China and the catering to the Chinese market and other markets and not getting to offense because of the power they have financially to affect some of these companies, especially these companies in the bigger things of Hollywood where movies are very expensive to make. The power league goes and pushes in their own message for other reasons. Like, they use the celebrities as a mouthpiece for them with threats of them being censored or dropped off the movie set or never put back in movies or put out of favor or blacklisted or whatever the hell they need to do to get them to follow along with what the message they have or what business agenda they have when it comes to a lot of things. And other things based on actual principles, personal principles. Some of the things are just based on the fact that money is involved. And the world does run on money for the most part. And most people's motivations for doing everything at the end of the day is money. That's how most of us survive in most of the Western world. We keep forgetting there's part of the world that don't have these motivations. They're not interested in what we're doing. They have no involvement or desire to be interested in these things we want to do because they live in parts of the world where they are completely, utterly not influenced by any of this. And they're not influenced by technology. They live the same way. If they've ever lived forever, they'll continue to live this life as long as we don't interfere with them, as long as we don't intrude on their space and take it over and try to turn them into us. They'll be more than happy to live the same way they live for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And who knows, maybe they've got it better than us, really, because the fact is maybe the ignorance to bliss thing is a true axiom of life. The fact is they don't have to worry about problems because there is no problems. The problems they have are more or less related to simple things like finding enough food, finding enough shelter, and warding off diseases, and taking care of the tribe, and being able to sustain itself in this ever-changing world that we're intruding on, making it smaller and smaller by making all those places, and not just living places, but animals and other things. As we grow more encroach in society, we take over more and more of the planet for the population of human beings. And this is something that we need to address very much so in the future. Very some generations, it's an issue that's become very, very important in terms of how we master the stewards of whether you believe in a God or not, or whatever is the reason why we are the top of the chain right now and masters of the Dominion. We need to respect the fact that we need to live on this planet together. We have to be respectful, not just other human beings, but the whole ecosystem of the planet, because it's something we need to be careful and cherish. Otherwise, our own existence might be challenged. And quite frankly, it's a scary thought to think that as I'm growing out in my elder years, that I'm going to be worrying about other generations now, and it's like the time that I may not be around much longer to see what happens. But I certainly want to make sure that those lessons don't get forgotten, and people do think on those terms, and then not just virtue sing on us, go up there and do things like Greta Thunberg, go up there. I'm sure she's well-meaning. I think she's a political shield, some degree manipulated by the power elite because of her own celebrity sort of thing, and the fact that she is a child and the fact that people will listen to her because she's a child. I do hope that her messaging is actually sincere. Not belittling her, saying their message is sincere, particularly sincere. She may have come from a very sincere place and very, very well-intentioned place, but unfortunately, I think that without that knowledge and experience and having that sort of worldly thing about all the forces in there that may be manipulating her unknowingly, ultimately, this is the problem with anyone that represents a sort of view. Well, no matter how well-intentioned they may be, there may be other people manipulating, pulling the strings like a Pinocchio, and using you to represent because you have the right representation that's going to get the message they want to get across, and you become a puppet, maybe not intentionally, a puppet of their agenda. And this is sad, and I hope as she gets older, she becomes more and more aware of all the stuff, the more nuanced the way the world is, and finds a way of expressing her message in a more enlightened and more thoughtful way, and understanding the nuances that there is balances we have to add. Society yes exists, but also we have to accommodate for the way we live in terms of not going backwards, and that, but at the same time respecting the environment. It's a balancing act, and it's not just all one way or the other way. And sometimes we base our ideas and principles on things we think we know all the information about, but we don't always know because the people that are involved in power don't always let us know these things. They don't want us to know. Ultimately, they don't want us to know a lot of things because the fact is it would mean that we challenge the very systems that made them rich and famous in the first place. And even though these people may seem like they're virtuous and they want to help, it doesn't necessarily mean they truly are forgoing the fact that they're in business. Many of them are making lots of money, and many of them are not really thinking long term about your existence after they're gone. They're just thinking about the comforts and luxury and the wealth that they build while they're still alive, and maybe the pass on to their inheritance, and they don't really concerned about yours, except as far as you being consumers of them and feeding them and doing the things that keep them very much wealthy in the way they are and the way things are. Anyway, well, I'm going to make this short and cut this off. This is just a up-to-date to say let you know what I'm doing. Hoping that the new year will be more on to this, especially after I'm going to attempt to get this going for Christmas time, with the holidays, and maybe come some more layered topics and talk about some things about traditions and some of the things that we do as a society and that, and things I used to do when I was younger and the reasons I did them and that, and how they've been affected by the changes in cultures and the things of the fact the world's becoming more condensed, and the fact that people are not being in singular groups of areas. People are spreading around with immigration and that. It's changing a lot of the way human beings do their customs and the adaptation of that, and also attempt to respect other people's cultures and maybe belief systems that may be counter to our own, and how that's reflected in the cultures of the countries they've been moved into, as opposed to the way they used to be before we had this larger percentage of people that didn't just integrate into the society that existed. And that all the culture and the evolution about the fact that there are some people out there that are wanting to question these original institutions for various reasons, and we can discuss all those reasons. I hope get some discussion going and see what type of consensus we're going to come up to in that. And in the new year, we'll start off fresh, and I hope we'll have some brand new topics in the year. Maybe we'll get a chance to discuss these other topics. Hopefully I get some discussions going as well about the existing topics I brought up today. And anyway, since tomorrow is my birthday, happy birthday to me. I'm going to go off. I'm going to close this broadcast for now, and I'm hopefully leave some comments and likes and shares on this thing. Like and share this video as much as possible with friends and family. I want to start building up a little bit of a library of people that can talk to his loyal followers, and hope to get some discussion going, make it interesting. Anyway, this is for the end of this week here, Thursday, November 18th, 2021, and I hope to be back on Tuesday with my regular broadcast, and we'll follow up there and we'll see you shortly. Take care and have a good day, people.